The PowerPoint slide is blurry. Or maybe it's my eyes. The name at the bottom of the slide is clear enough, though. Mark Bishop, Project Manager. My Mark. Not my Mark. Not for a long, long time. He's pointing a red laser at a bar graph showing quarterly logistics failures, but his hand is shaking so badly the little red is dancing a frantic jig all over the screen. He hasn't seen me yet. I'm sitting in the back of the conference room, in the plush leather chair reserved for the new senior director of operations. My chair. He clears his throat, the sound unnaturally loud in the silent, air-conditioned room. He's sweating. I can see the dark patch forming on the back of his crisp blue shirt, right between his shoulder blades. The same spot I used to trace with my finger after we made love, when the world was soft and safe and belonged only to us. Now, the world is sharp and cold, and the only thing that belongs to me is this moment. This exquisite, terrifying, long-overdue moment. He clicks to the next slide. His voice cracks on the word synergy, and I just sit here, my hands folded calmly on the polished mahogany table, and I wait. If you've ever had a moment where the entire world seemed to stop, holding its breath just for you, tell me about it in the comments. I read every single one. And if this story already feels like it's speaking to you, please subscribe. Your support helps me bring these moments to life, and it means more than you can possibly imagine. 5 years ago, the only synergy I cared about was the way Mark's hand fit in mine. Our life was a quiet, comfortable rhythm. A 2-story colonial with robin's egg blue shutters, a garden I was fiercely proud of, and a golden retriever named Gus who thought Mark was the sun and I was the moon. We were that couple. The one our friends pointed to and said, "See? It's possible." We hosted barbecues in the summer where the air smelled of cut grass and charcoal, and holiday parties in the winter where the windows fogged up from the warmth of too many people laughing in one place. Our future was a blueprint we'd drawn together. A corner office for him, a small consulting business for me, 2 kids, a beach house in the Outer Banks. It was all neatly planned, a life laminated against spills and tears. Mark was my architect. He was the one with the grand visions, the 5-year plans, the meticulously managed retirement accounts. I was the artist, the one who chose the paint colors and planted the unruly sunflowers that defied the neat rows of the garden. He was the structure. I was the soul.
He used to say that.
He'd wrap his arms around me from behind while I was washing dishes, press his lips to my temple, and whisper, "You're the soul of this house, Sarah. The soul of my life." And I believed him. I leaned into his strength, his certainty, his unwavering belief that if we just followed the plan, everything would be perfect. We were a team, in sickness and in health. We'd said the words in front of 100 people, our hands trembling not from fear, but from the sheer, overwhelming rightness of it all. In sickness and in health. A promise etched in gold on his finger and mine. A promise that felt as solid and real as the oak tree in our front yard. I remember one specific Tuesday. It was raining, a soft, persistent drizzle that blurred the world outside our kitchen window. I was trying to perfect a Coke oven recipe, and the whole house smelled of wine and thyme and bacon. Mark came home early, his suit soaked, his hair plastered to his forehead. He didn't say a word. He just walked over, took the wooden spoon from my hand, and pulled me into a slow dance right there on the linoleum floor. There was no music, just the gentle patter of the rain and the sound of our breathing. He held me so tight I could feel his heart beating against my ribs. "What was that for?" I'd asked, laughing into his shoulder. He pulled back, his eyes serious, a little bit sad. "Just reminding myself how lucky I am," he said. "Just locking this moment away. You, me, this kitchen. It's everything." I didn't know then that he wasn't locking it away for safekeeping. He was locking it away, like a memory he was already preparing to leave behind. But in that moment, I felt a love so profound, so absolute. It felt like it could weather any storm. A few months later, the storm came. And it turned out our house was made of paper. It started with a fatigue I couldn't shake. A deep, cellular exhaustion that no amount of sleep could fix. Then came the nagging pain in my side, a dull, ache I dismissed as a pulled muscle. Mark was the one who insisted I go to the doctor. He was so worried. He held my hand in the waiting room, his thumb rubbing circles over my knuckles. "It's probably nothing, babe," he said, his voice a little too tight, a little too cheerful. "You've just been overdoing it," but his eyes told a different story. They were filled with a fear I hadn't seen since his father had a heart attack years earlier. He was my rock. My steady, unshakable rock. The word itself didn't even register at first. Malignant. It was a clinical, sterile word. It didn't belong to me, to us, to our cozy life. It belonged in medical dramas on TV. The doctor's voice became a low hum, a swarm of bees in the small, beige room. Words like carcinoma and stage 3 and aggressive floated past me. I felt myself drifting away, watching the scene from a great height. I saw a woman who looked like me, sitting on a crinkly paper-covered table, and a man who looked like my husband, his face pale, his knuckles white as he gripped the arm of his chair. But it wasn't real. It couldn't be. Then I felt Mark's hand squeeze mine hard. It was a lifeline, pulling me back into the room, back into my own body. I looked at him, and the terror in his eyes finally made it real. My world didn't just tilt on its axis, it shattered into a million pieces. He was amazing at first. He held me in the car on the way home as I sobbed, my body shaking with a grief so raw it felt like I was already mourning myself. He whispered promises into my hair. "We're going to fight this, Sarah. You're not alone. I'm right here. We'll beat this together." He became my general, orchestrating appointments, researching specialists, creating spreadsheets of my medication schedules. He cooked for me, bland, soulless meals that were easy on my stomach, but he served them with a tenderness that nourished me more than the food itself. Our friends and family rallied, creating a fortress of casseroles and concerned phone calls around us. For a few weeks, it felt like the sickness had just reinforced our bond, forging it into something stronger, something unbreakable. We were a unit, fighting a common enemy. It was us against the world, us against the traitorous cells multiplying inside my body. The first chemo session was brutal. The room was painted a relentlessly cheerful yellow that felt like a mockery. The smell of antiseptic clung to everything. I sat in a reclining chair, watching a clear liquid drip from a plastic bag, down a tube, and into my arm. Poison. A necessary poison that would hopefully kill the cancer before it killed me. Mark sat beside me, holding a paperback book he wasn't reading, his eyes fixed on my face, tracking every flicker of nausea, every bead of sweat. He held the basin for me when I got sick. He wiped my mouth with a cool cloth. He was there. Solid. Dependable. My Mark. When my hair started to fall out, it was the first real crack in my composure. It came out in clumps in the shower, a fistful of my own identity clogging the drain. I collapsed onto the bath mat, a wailing, pathetic heap. Mark came in, knelt beside me, and just held me. The next day, he came home with his head shaved. A beautiful, stupid, heartfelt gesture of solidarity. "Now we're twins," he'd said, his smile not quite reaching his eyes. I cried again, but this time from a place of overwhelming love. This was the man I married. This was the promise. In sickness and in health. But the sickness was a marathon, not a sprint. And Mark, I would learn, was a sprinter. The chemo sessions blurred into a miserable cycle of sickness and exhaustion. The fortress of casseroles dwindled. The concerned phone calls became less frequent. Life went on for everyone else, while mine was stuck in a nauseous, terrifying loop. And slowly, almost imperceptibly at first, Mark started to pull away. It wasn't one big thing, but 1,000 tiny erosions. He started staying late at the office. "Big project," he'd say, kissing my forehead before he left in the morning. Can't be helped, the smell of his office, paper and stale coffee, was replaced by something else. A faint, floral scent that wasn't mine. I was too tired, too sick to question it. I wanted to believe him. I needed to believe him. Then he missed a chemo session. He was supposed to drive me. I waited, dressed and ready, my chemo bag by the door. An hour passed. I called his cell. It went to voicemail. I called his office. His secretary, a kind woman named Carol, sounded flustered. "Oh, Sarah, he left for a client lunch hours ago." A client lunch. My blood ran cold. He finally called me back 2 hours later, his voice breathless and full of apologies. "God, Sarah, I'm so sorry. I got stuck in a meeting that ran way over. My phone died. I feel terrible." The lies were so smooth, so practiced. A part of me knew, even then. A cold, sharp little voice in the back of my mind whispered the truth. But I couldn't listen to it. To listen to that voice was to admit that I was truly alone. And I wasn't strong enough for that. So I pushed it down. I let him drive me to my rescheduled appointment the next day. I let him hold my hand and tell me how sorry he was. I let myself believe the lie because the truth was simply too devastating to bear. The distance between us grew into a chasm. He slept on the couch most nights. "I don't want to disturb you," he'd say. "You need your rest," but I knew he couldn't stand the sight of me. My bald head, my pale, gaunt face. I was a constant, living reminder of sickness and mortality, and he was a man who only knew how to run toward life. The floral scent on his clothes became a regular thing. I found a receipt for a jewelry store in his pocket while doing laundry. A delicate silver necklace. My birthday wasn't for months. So was Christmas. I didn't ask. I was afraid of the answer. Our house, once so full of warmth and laughter, became a silent, cold museum of a life we used to have. The silence was the worst part. It was heavy, suffocating. It was filled with all the things we weren't saying. I was fighting for my life, and my husband, my partner, my rock, was a ghost in his own home. The argument started, always late at night, always in hushed, angry whispers. I was too weak to yell. "Where were you, Mark?" I'd ask, my voice raspy from the chemo sores in my throat. "I have a life too, Sarah," he'd snap back, his face a mask of resentment. "I can't just stop everything. The bills still have to be paid. The world doesn't stop just because you're sick." He started using my illness as a weapon. If I got emotional, if I cried, he'd say, "It's the chemo talking. You're not thinking straight." He made me feel like I was crazy, paranoid, ungrateful. He was gaslighting me while I was fighting for my life, and the cruelty of it was a special kind of poison, one the doctors had no antidote for. It attacked my spirit, my will to fight. I started to feel like maybe he was right. Maybe I was the problem. Maybe I was too much of a burden. The breaking point came on a Tuesday night. It was raining, just like it had been that day he danced with me in the kitchen. A cruel, poetic echo. I was in the worst phase of the chemo cycle. I couldn't keep food down. Every bone in my body ached. I was lying in bed, staring at the ceiling, listening to the clock tick, each second an eternity. He was supposed to be home hours ago. His phone went straight to voicemail. At midnight, I heard his key in a lock. He tiptoed into the bedroom, thinking I was asleep. The floral perfume was so strong it made me gag. It was clinging to his skin, woven into the fabric of his shirt. It was the scent of betrayal. "Where were you?" My voice was barely a whisper, but it cut through the silence like a knife. He froze in the doorway, a silhouette against the hall light. "Working late," he mumbled, not looking at me. "Don't lie to me, Mark," I said, and I felt a flicker of some long-dormant strength. "Not anymore. Just tell me the truth." He sank onto the edge of the bed, his back to me. For a long time he said nothing. The only sound was the rain against the window pane. Then he spoke, his voice so quiet I almost missed it. "I can't do this anymore, Sarah." He still wouldn't look at me. He was staring at his hands, as if they belonged to a stranger. "This isn't a life. It's just waiting for you to get better or not. I'm tired of being sad. I'm tired of being scared." Every word was a physical blow. I felt the air leave my lungs. "So you found someone who isn't sad?" I asked, the words tasting like acid. He finally turned to look at me, and his eyes were hollow. There was no love there. Not even pity. Just exhaustion. "Yes," he confessed. "Her name is Chloe. It's been going on for a few months. I'm in love with her." I'm in love with her. 3 words. That's all it took to demolish what was left of my world. I didn't scream. I didn't cry. I felt a strange, terrifying calm settle over me. It was the calm of absolute devastation, the quiet after the bomb has already fallen. You promised, I whispered. In sickness and in health he flinched, a flicker of something, shame, maybe in his eyes. I know, he said, but I'm not strong enough.
I'm sorry, Sarah.
I'm so sorry. He stood up. He walked to the closet and pulled out a suitcase. He packed with an efficiency that told me he'd been planning this for a long time. He took his suits, his running shoes, the framed photo of us from our wedding. He left behind everything else. He left behind me. As he walked out of the bedroom, he paused at the door. She makes me happy, Sarah, he said, as if that explained everything. As if his happiness was the only thing that mattered. Then he was gone. The front door clicked shut, and the silence that rushed in was absolute. It was the sound of the end of the world. I lay there for hours, listening to the rain, my body a leaden weight in the bed. The physical pain from the chemo was nothing compared to this. This was a soul-deep agony. He hadn't just left me. He had abandoned me at the lowest, most vulnerable point in my life. He had looked at my pain, my fear, my fight for survival, and decided it was an inconvenience. He had chosen easy and new over difficult and familiar. He had chosen her. The next few weeks were a blur of misery. My friends were furious. My parents were heartbroken. They rallied around me, a fierce, protective circle. They brought me food I couldn't eat, cleaned the house that felt haunted, and drove me to my chemo appointments. They were wonderful, but when they went home at night, the silence returned. The emptiness of the house was a physical presence. Every room held a ghost. I'd see him coming through the door, hear his laugh in the kitchen, feel the weight of him on the other side of the bed. I had to sell the house. I couldn't afford the mortgage on my own, and besides, I couldn't stand to live with the memories anymore. Packing up our life together, box by box, was a special kind of torture. I found old love letters, photo albums, the stupid little gifts we'd given each other. Each one was a fresh stab of pain. I hired movers because I was too weak to lift the boxes myself. I watched them carry away our sofa, our dining table, our bed. I watched them dismantle our life. I moved into a small, sterile apartment with beige walls and a view of a parking lot. It was anonymous and depressing, and for the first time, I was grateful for it. There were no ghosts here.
No memories.
Just a profound, crushing loneliness. There were days I wanted to give up. I'd lie in bed, the nausea rolling over me, the despair a heavy blanket, and I'd think, what's the point? I'm fighting so hard for a life I don't even want anymore. A life without him. A life where I'm a sick, bald, divorced woman living in a sad little apartment. The temptation to just stop, to let the cancer win, was seductive. It whispered to me in the long, dark hours of the night.
It would be so easy.
Just stop the chemo. Just let go. One night, I was looking at myself in the bathroom mirror. I barely recognized the person staring back. Her face was gaunt, her skin had a grayish pallor. Her eyes were sunken and hollow. And her head was completely bald, smooth and vulnerable like a baby's. I saw what he must have seen. A patient. A victim. A burden. And in that moment, I hated him more than I hated the cancer. The cancer was just biology, a random, cruel twist of fate. But what he did, that was a choice. He chose to be cruel. He chose to abandon me. The day of my last chemo session arrived. I took a cab to the hospital. I sat in the cheerful yellow room by myself. I watched the last bag of poison drip into my veins. My nurse, a kind woman named Brenda with warm hands and even warmer eyes, came over to unhook my for the final time. She smiled at me, a genuine, beaming smile. "You did it, honey," she said, her voice thick with emotion. "You got through it. The hard part is over." And as she said it, something shifted inside me. It wasn't relief, not yet. It was something else. A wave of pure, unadulterated rage. It was a cold, clean fire that burned away the fog of despair. The hard part wasn't over. The hard part was just beginning. But for the first time in a long time, I felt ready for it. I looked at Brenda, and I smiled back a real smile. Yes, I said. I did in that moment. I made a new promise to myself. Mark Bishop would not be the defining tragedy of my life. He would not be the sad ending to my story. He would be a footnote, a prologue. My survival would be my revenge. And my success would be my salvation. The recovery was slow and grueling. Getting my physical strength back was an uphill battle. I started with short walks around my apartment complex, my legs feeling like they were made of jelly. Each day, I pushed myself a little farther.
To the end of the block.
Around the park. I started eating again, real food, and slowly the color returned to my cheeks. My hair started to grow back. It came in fuzzy at first, like a baby duck's. Then it grew into short, tight curls. It was darker than it used to be and thicker. It felt like someone else's hair. I felt like someone else. The old Sarah, the one who planted sunflowers and slow danced in the kitchen, was gone. She had died in that silent house on the night he left. This new Sarah was different. She was harder, sharper. She had been forged in fire and poison and betrayal, and she was unbreakable. I needed a purpose, something to focus on besides my own healing. My old consulting work felt trivial. I wanted something more. Something that would challenge me, consume me. I had a background in business logistics, but I decided to pivot. I enrolled in online courses for corporate restructuring and strategic management. I spent my nights and weekends studying, my mind hungry for something to chew on other than my own grief. I filled notebooks with theories and case studies. I became obsessed. It was a welcome distraction, a way to rebuild my mind while my body was rebuilding itself. I found a new kind of power in it. The world of business was logical, ruthless, and unsentimental. There were winners and losers. It was a game I realized I wanted to learn how to play and win. 6 months after my last chemo treatment, my oncologist told me the 3 words I had been praying for. No evidence of disease. I was in remission. I should have been ecstatic. I should have cried with joy. But I just felt a quiet, profound sense of calm. The cancer was gone. The first battle was won. Now it was time for the next one. I started applying for jobs. Not the kind of jobs I would have applied for before, but ambitious, reach-for-the-stars kinds of jobs. I was rejected from dozens. My resume had a year-long gap that was hard to explain. But I was relentless. For every no, I sent out 10 more applications. I honed my interview skills. I learned to project a confidence I didn't always feel. I walked into interviews with my short, curly hair, a symbol of my survival, and I refused to be seen as a victim. Finally, I got a call for a 3rd-round interview for a senior director of operations position at a fast-growing tech firm called Sonova. It was a massive leap, a job that was 2 levels above anything I'd done before. The interview was a panel of 4 vice presidents. They grilled me for 2 hours. They threw complex logistical problems at me, asked for 5-year strategic plans, and challenged every assumption I made. But I was ready. I had spent months preparing for this. I was sharp, focused, and I knew my stuff. I didn't just answer their questions, I challenged them back. I pointed out flaws in their current systems and proposed innovative solutions. I spoke with a cold, hard clarity that came from having faced down my own mortality. After you've stared into the abyss, a panel of VPs in expensive suits doesn't seem so intimidating. I left the interview feeling drained, but exhilarated. I had left everything on the table. A week later, my phone rang. It was the head of HR. They were offering me the job. I accepted on the spot, my voice steady and professional. But as soon as I hung up, I sank to the floor of my apartment and cried. It wasn't a cry of sadness or grief. It was a cry of pure, unadulterated triumph. I had done it. I had clawed my way back from the brink, on my own terms. I was no longer a patient. I was a director. My first day at Sonova was a whirlwind of orientations and paperwork. I was given a corner office on the 34th floor with a floor-to-ceiling window that looked out over the entire city. The view was breathtaking. It felt like I was on top of the world. My new boss, a sharp, no-nonsense woman named Evelyn, handed me a thick binder. "This is your team," she said. "Org charts, performance reviews, current projects. Get up to speed. You're meeting them all tomorrow morning at 9". I spent the rest of the day in my new office, the smell of fresh paint and new carpet filling my senses, and I devoured that binder. I memorized the names, the faces, the job titles of the 20 people who would now report to me. I wanted to be prepared. I wanted to be the best damn director they had ever had. I was on the last section, the project management division, when I saw it. A name that made the air in my lungs turn to ice. Bishop Mark. Project manager. Underneath was a grainy ID photo. It was him. Older, a little heavier, his hairline receding slightly, but unmistakably him. My ex-husband. The man who had left me to die. He worked here. Not just here, but in my department. On my team. Reporting directly to me. For a moment, I couldn't breathe. The room started to spin. I felt a wave of nausea, so intense it was like the chemo all over again. I gripped the edge of my new desk, my knuckles turning white. This had to be a joke. A sick, cosmic prank. I wanted to scream. I wanted to run. I wanted to call Evelyn and tell her I couldn't take the job, that there had been a terrible mistake. But then the rage returned. That cold, clean fire. It burned away the panic, leaving behind a chilling clarity. Run? Why should I run? I had earned this. I had fought for this office, this title, this view. I had survived cancer, heartbreak, and utter devastation to get here. I wasn't going to let the ghost of my past chase me away from my future. This wasn't a cosmic prank. This was a cosmic gift. The universe hadn't just given me a second chance at life. It had given me a front row seat to the next chapter of his. And I would be the one holding the pen. I closed the binder. I took a deep, steadying breath. I looked out at the city lights twinkling below me. Tomorrow was going to be a very interesting day. I chose my outfit for the meeting with the precision of a general preparing for battle. A charcoal gray dress, sharp and severe. Heels that made a decisive click on the polished floors. My hair, now a chic, short style, was perfect. I put on makeup, not to hide, but to accentuate. My lipstick was a deep, blood red. It was armor. When I walked into that conference room at 8:55 a.m., I felt nothing but a cold, humming power. I took my place at the head of the table. I arranged my notes. And I waited. My team filed in, chatting and laughing, grabbing coffee and pastries from the cart in the corner. They were curious, sizing up their new boss. Then he walked in. He was in the middle of a joke with the guy next to him, a wide, easy smile on his face. The smile he used to give me. He looked up, his eyes scanned the room, and then they landed on me. The smile didn't just fade. It was wiped clean from his face, as if it had never been there. His color drained away, leaving a pasty, grayish pallor that I knew all too well. His mouth fell slightly open. He froze, one foot in front of the other, his briefcase slipping from his suddenly nerveless fingers and hitting the carpet with a soft thud. The entire room went silent. Everyone turned to look at him, then at me. The air crackled with unspoken questions. I held his gaze for a beat longer than was professionally necessary. I let him see me. Really see me. Not the sick, broken woman he had left behind, but this person. This woman in a power dress at the head of his conference table. I gave him nothing. No flicker of recognition, no hint of anger or pain. My expression was a blank slate of calm, professional authority. Then I broke the eye contact and smiled warmly at the rest of the room. "Good morning, everyone," I said, my voice smooth and even.
I am Sarah Jenkins.
I'm so excited to be joining the Sonova team as your new senior director. The first few weeks were a masterclass in psychological warfare, executed with perfect corporate decorum. I treated Mark with a detached, professional politeness that was more unnerving than any open hostility could ever have been. I called him Mr. Bishop in meetings. I sent him curt, formal emails. I gave him the same brief, professional smile I gave everyone else. To the rest of the team, I was a demanding but fair boss. I was tough, I had high expectations, but I was also supportive and gave credit where it was due. But with Mark, every interaction was a carefully calibrated exercise in demonstrating my absolute authority. I was his boss. His career, his projects, his future at this company were in my hands. And we both knew it. He tried to talk to me, of course. On my second day, he appeared at the door of my office, looking haunted. "Sarah," he started, his voice a hoarse whisper. "We need to talk." I looked up from my computer, my expression one of mild, professional inquiry, as if he were any other employee. "Do you have a meeting scheduled, Mr. Bishop?" asked, my tone cool. "No, but my calendar is available through my assistant." I cut him off smoothly. "Please have her find a time that works. Now, if you'll excuse me, I have a call with the VP of Engineering in 2 minutes." I turned back to my screen, a clear dismissal. He stood there for a moment, helpless, before retreating. He never tried to approach me outside of a scheduled meeting again. I learned through the office grapevine that he was still with Chloe. They had bought a house in the suburbs, a colonial with, of all things, blue shutters. They had a golden retriever. He had essentially recreated the life he'd had with me, just with a different, healthier leading lady. The irony was so bitter, it was almost funny. A part of me, a small, wounded part, was stung by it. But the new Sarah, the director in the corner office, found it pathetic. He wasn't an architect of a new life. He was just recycling old blueprints. His work, I quickly discovered, was mediocre.
He was coasting.
He did the bare minimum to get by. His project reports were often late and filled with superficial analysis. Under his previous boss, a man on the verge of retirement, this had apparently been acceptable. It was not acceptable to me. I started holding him to the same high standard I held everyone else to. I questioned his assumptions in team meetings. I sent back his reports covered in red ink, demanding more data, deeper analysis. "This is a good start, Mr. Bishop," I'd say in front of everyone. "But I need you to dig deeper.
What are the downstream impacts?
Have you stress-tested these numbers?" He would flush, stammering out excuses, while the rest of the team watched, their faces carefully neutral. I wasn't being cruel. I was just being a good manager. But to him, it must have felt like a relentless, public flogging. The climax of our professional relationship came during the quarterly project review with the executive team. Each project manager had to present their flagship project to me, Evelyn, and 2 other VPs. It was a high-stakes meeting that could make or break a career. Mark's project was a logistics overhaul he'd apparently been working on for over a year. He was clearly nervous, his hands shaking as he set up his laptop. He began his presentation, and it was fine. It was adequate. It was the epitome of his entire work ethic, bland, uninspired, and completely average. He finished and looked at the VPs, a hopeful, pleading look on his face. They turned to me. "Sarah, your thoughts?" Evelyn asked. I took a slow sip of water. I let the silence stretch out, letting Mark stew in it. "Thank you, Mr. Bishop," I began, my voice calm and measured. The presentation was clear. I paused. "However, I have some fundamental concerns. Your proposal relies on a legacy software platform that we're phasing out in Q3. Your budget forecast doesn't account for the new union labor agreement, which will increase costs by at least 12%. And your risk assessment completely ignores the potential for supply chain disruption from the new tariffs in Southeast Asia. In short," I concluded, looking him directly in the eye, "this plan is not just uninspired, it's unviable. It exposes the company to significant financial and operational risk." The blood drained from his face. The VPs were nodding, looking at their copies of his report, and then back at me with impressed expressions. I had just dismantled his year's worth of work in under 60 seconds. "We're pulling the plug on this project, effective immediately," I said, my voice leaving no room for argument. "We'll be reassigning the budget to a more promising initiative. Thank you for your time, Mr. Bishop." That will be all. He just stood there, speechless, his PowerPoint remote dangling from his hand. He looked small.
defeated.
He gathered his things in a daze and walked out of the room without another word. After he left, Evelyn turned to me, a small, approving smile on her face.
Good call, Sarah, she said.
He's been coasting for years. It's about time someone held his feet to the fire. I just nodded, my face a mask of professional composure. Inside, my heart was hammering. It wasn't triumph I felt. It was a cold, quiet, and deeply satisfying sense of order being restored to the universe. That afternoon, he requested a meeting. My assistant scheduled him for 4:30 p.m., and he walked into my office and shut the door behind him. He looked terrible. His eyes were red-rimmed. His suit was rumpled. He didn't sit in the chair I gestured to. He just stood in the middle of my office, looking lost. "Why are you doing this, Sarah?" he asked, his voice cracking. "Doing what, Mark?" I asked, leaning back in my chair, my hands steepled under my chin. "My job." "You know what I mean," he said, his voice rising. "You're trying to destroy me. You're humiliating me in front of everyone. You're sabotaging my career." I raised an eyebrow. "Your work is sabotaging your career, Mark. It's lazy. It's uninspired. You've been getting by on the bare minimum for years, and now you have a boss who won't accept it. That's not a personal vendetta. That's called accountability." He deflated, the anger draining out of him, replaced by a pathetic desperation. "Please," he begged. "Just give me a break." For what we used to have, I almost laughed. The audacity of it was breathtaking. He was invoking our past, the past he had shattered, as a reason for me to give him a professional pass. "What we used to have," I said, my voice dropping to a dangerously quiet level. "Let's talk about that, shall we? Let's talk about the man who promised to love me in sickness and in health, and then abandoned me when I was bald, vomiting, and fighting for my life. Let's talk about the man who told me my illness was an inconvenience to his happiness. That man is asking me for a break." He flinched as if I'd slapped him. "Sarah, I cut him off, my voice like ice. "You don't get to use my name like that anymore. Here, you are Mr. Bishop, an underperforming employee on my team. And I am Ms. Jenkins, your boss. The one who signs your performance reviews. And frankly, Mr. Bishop, your performance is on a fast track to a formal improvement plan. Are we clear?" He stared at me, his mouth opening and closing like a fish. He was seeing me for the first time, I think. Not as his ex-wife, not as a ghost from his past, but as the architect of his professional doom. The powerlessness in his eyes was a mirror of the powerlessness I had felt for so long. "I'm sorry," he whispered, the words barely audible. "I know it's too late. I know it doesn't mean anything now. But I am so sorry for what I did to you." I was a coward. I looked at him, at this broken, pathetic man, and I felt nothing. The rage was gone. The pain was a distant echo. All that was left was a vast, empty space where my love for him used to be. "Your apology is noted, Mr. Bishop," I said, my voice flat and final. "Now I have a 5 o'clock meeting. You're dismissed." He turned and walked out of my office, shutting the door softly behind him. I swiveled my chair to face the window. The sun was setting, painting the sky in brilliant strokes of orange and purple. The city looked beautiful, peaceful. I had won, but it didn't feel like a victory. It just felt over. The performance improvement plan was inevitable. His work didn't get better. If anything, it got worse under the pressure. He was distracted, demoralized. I followed corporate protocol to the letter. I documented everything. The missed deadlines, the subpar reports, the negative feedback from his project stakeholders. I met with him weekly, my tone always professionally concerned, to discuss his lack of progress. Each meeting was a slow, methodical execution. He knew where it was heading. I knew where it was heading. 3 months later, I sat across from him in a small, windowless conference room with an HR representative beside me. I slid a folder across the table. "Mark," I said, using his first name for the first time since I'd started. "As you know, you have failed to meet the objectives of your performance plan. As a result, we're terminating your employment with Sonova, effective immediately." He just nodded. He didn't argue. He didn't beg. He just looked tired. He signed the papers, his hand moving slowly, deliberately. The HR rep explained the severance package, the COBRA benefits, the logistics of returning his company property. He didn't seem to be listening. He just kept his eyes on the table. As we stood to leave, he finally looked at me. His eyes were full of a strange mix of emotions: resentment, regret, and something else, a grudging respect. "You survived," he said, his voice quiet. "You really survived." It wasn't a question. It was a statement of awe. "Yes," I said. "I did. Goodbye, Mark." I turned and walked out of the room without looking back. I left the office building that evening and didn't go straight home. I walked. I walked for miles, through the bustling city streets, past laughing couples and crowded restaurants. The world felt vibrant, alive. I didn't feel the giddy thrill of revenge I might have expected. There was no joy in destroying him. There was only a quiet, profound sense of closure. His betrayal was a weight I had been carrying for 5 years. And that day, in that small, windowless room, I had finally put it down. I ended up at a small park overlooking the river. I sat on a bench and watched the boats glide by, their lights twinkling on the dark water. I thought about the woman I used to be, the one who believed in blueprints and happily ever afters. I grieved for her lost innocence. But I didn't wish her back. The woman I was now was stronger. She had scars, yes, but those scars were a testament to what she had endured. She had walked through fire and emerged not burned, but tempered. She had built a new life, not from a recycled blueprint, but from the ashes of the old one. A life that was all her own. And as I sat there, a cool breeze on my face, I realized I was finally, truly free. I wasn't his victim anymore. I wasn't even his boss. I was just Sarah. And for the first time in a very long time, that was more than enough. If this story hit close to home, if you've ever had to rebuild yourself from the ashes of a life you thought you knew, I'd love to hear your version in the comments below. Your stories give me strength. And subscribing helps bring more of these to life. Thanks for being here with me.